The last few minutes, President Trump has tweeted saying that he and the First Lady have tested positive for COVID-19. Let's go straight to Los Angeles and our US correspondent, Greg Milam. Morning to you, Greg. I mean, we knew this was a possibility, but this is going to play really big in the States, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, this is a tweet 5 to 1 in the morning in Washington, and that tweet from the president saying we will get through this together. But you're right, it's been coming in the last couple of hours, and I can take you through what happened. Excuse me. Hope Hicks, who's one of the closest, if not the closest advisor to Donald Trump, was confirmed a few hours ago as having tested positive for COVID-19. Now, she has been travelling with the president throughout this week. She was on that trip to Cleveland in Ohio for the presidential debate on Tuesday. She was with him on a trip to a rally in Minnesota on Wednesday. Now, on that trip to Minnesota, she'd had a test. She was found to be negative before travelling. She began to feel unwell on the trip and quarantined on the plane back. She'd been on Air Force One and Marine One with the president. She tested positive when she got back, and that was on Wednesday night. And as a result of that, in the last few hours, the president confirmed that he and the First Lady had been tested for COVID-19. They were, in his words, beginning the quarantine process, and they expected the result in the next few hours, and that result is what we've just got back in the last few minutes. What's interesting is that the White House knew that Hope Hicks was positive on Wednesday night, Washington time, but still the president went ahead yesterday with the visit to his golf course in New Jersey, in Bedminster. That was for a fundraiser. So even though they knew he'd been in close contact with someone who had tested positive, that trip was allowed to go ahead. And it's only in the last few hours that quarantine process has begun, and that will be a 14-day quarantine process. We wait to hear from the White House what the protocol is. Now, under guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control, you would assume the president is considered an essential worker, so he will be able to continue to do his job from the White House. You would imagine, although there is the possibility that the Vice President, Mike Pence, will be able to step in. But all of this, of course, in an election campaign, and events planned for the next few days and weeks as he seeks re-election. This is a real bombshell from a man, of course, who has always downplayed his own vulnerability to this virus.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, this is going to bring back all the things that he said right at the beginning of all of this, isn't it? I mean, even down to him claiming at one point that this was all just a hoax. I mean, in terms of the presidential campaigning and what the Democrats and those Republicans who are against Trump are going to say, I mean, this gives them almost an open goal, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the very beginning, and of course, in the presidential debate earlier this week, Joe Biden made a great play of the fact that Donald Trump early on had said this would disappear like a miracle. He mocked the fact that Donald Trump had talked about injecting bleach, although Donald Trump said he was being sarcastic. Of course, hydroxychloroquine, the president said he had taken a course of that to make sure that he didn't get the virus himself. And yet here we are, like his ally in Brazil, who had downplayed the risks, but then was tested positive. It's happened. And Donald Trump, as I say, has downplayed his own vulnerability. He very rarely wears a mask himself. As we know, he carries one. He showed it on the debate stage, but he very rarely wears that mask. Some of those around him do. Those who come into close proximity in the White House are tested every day. But we see the pictures of him travelling, and certainly to the debate earlier this week, not all of them wearing masks. And he's continued to hold those rallies. And that one in Minnesota this week is an example. Thousands of people packed together in those rallies. Not many of them are wearing masks. A lot of them will tell you they don't believe that the virus is a great risk to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be happy to jam together in those events without masks. He says that they're open air events, and that is true. So the risk is less. But this will be a pretty sobering moment for those who are supporters of the president and have heard those messages. And it goes to the heart, of course, of his whole handling of this pandemic and that suggestion that there have always been mixed messages. He said people didn't need to wear masks, and then he did wear a mask. Said it's up to people to do what they want. He's talked about reopening the economy. He's talked in recent weeks about America rounding the corner in facing down this pandemic, in the face actually of what some of his medical experts have been saying. And here he is now himself testing positive, and the First Lady as well. What's interesting is that on his schedule for Friday, and he may well continue to work from the White House, of course, even in quarantine, he was due to speak to He's due to hold a call on support for the elderly who were suffering from COVID-19. Well, we should remember he is in that group. He's 74 years old. He is one of the vulnerable people, more vulnerable group of the population from this virus.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we wish him the best, as we would with anyone who tests positive for COVID-19. But as you say, because of his age, because, you know, I suppose he could be described as being a little overweight as well, which is also one of the risk factors with COVID-19. There is a possibility, at least, that he could become quite seriously ill, as we saw with Boris Johnson here. Now, again, that raises very serious questions, doesn't it, about what is going to happen, what could happen, what protocols and measures are going to be in place come the presidential election.
Yeah, and that election campaign will continue apace. I mean, it will be interesting if Donald Trump is not able to campaign, for example. Precedent would suggest that maybe Joe Biden would put a pause on his campaign when his rival is not able to campaign. But we're at the very early stages of that discussion. It could well be that the symptoms will be mild, and as I say, he will be able to continue doing the job of president first and foremost, and maybe continue to run that campaign. Of course, this campaign already looked very different to previous election campaigns. Certainly on Joe Biden's side, many of the events were remote. They weren't the big crowds, they weren't the big rallies, but Donald Trump was doing those big rallies, and he felt they were necessary. He's behind in the polls. He felt he needed to get to his core supporters and see them face to face. He won't be able to do that now. He's got events planned in the next few days, but I think it will be for the medics, and the President of the United States has the best medical support that is available to anyone, as you would imagine. It will be for them to decide what is possible in the next few days. And of course, Donald Trump has a megaphone to millions of people through Twitter, so I don't imagine that that will stop, even if he is hunkered down in the residence in the White House. But it's a very uncertain time, of course, for his campaign and what's going on in America right now. But any time a president is ill in any form, and this is a very serious illness, of course, it's an uncertain time for the rest of the United States. There are protocols. There is a process in place that will, if he's incapacitated in any way, that will kick in. That will happen. But we're at a crucial time, 30-odd days from an election, and a lot is up in the air in terms of that election and in terms of what happens next in America.